Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August 10th City Council meeting. Roll call, Mayor Mark gone and Councillor Doug Morrell are absent. Invocation. Would you like to read the invocation tonight, Dennis?
I don't have it in front of me, but I'm happy to give one.
Would you?
Our dear Father in heaven, as we gather tonight as in the City Council here in the meeting, we invite Thy Spirit to attend us. We pray that we'll be able to have Thy wisdom and understanding and be able to know how best to proceed to the benefit of the citizens. And we pray that Thou will watch over and bless each of the councilors and their efforts and their work, and grateful for their willingness to serve in this capacity and to represent the members of this region. We again invite Thy Spirit to be with us here in this meeting, that there will be able to be communication and positive and constructive argument and discussion, and that we'll take care of the matters at hand as we need to. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dennis. Item 3, would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 5, City Council Minutes from June 29th, 2020. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor? Passes. 6, bid awards, recognitions, and appointments. Item A, appointment of deputy clerk. Dennis.
Councilors, according to our charter, if there's a deputy clerk to be appointed, that comes to you at the request of the city clerk. And Ms. Danielle Brissett is here tonight. She can, I think, address this.
Oh, I wasn't prepared. So I moved from deputy clerk to clerk on Monday, leaving one spot open in our office. Having 2 assistants is fine, but we do have Sue, who came to us with several years of experience and knows her way around the clerk world. And I would like to appoint Sue Schedule, our newest member of our office, as the deputy clerk.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? I have to apologize. I skipped right over public forum. So we will go back and do public forum. Dennis, do you want to start with public forum item from Woodland?
We received an email from the town of Woodland with regards to the matter on the agenda, the fire and EMS related rates report down under the city manager's report. And I'll just read this email. It says, I am attaching a list of questions that our board would like addressed at the meeting tonight at 6 p.m. These questions are in regards to the fire EMS service fees. If you could please respond to this email letting me know that you received it and that the questions we presented, I would greatly appreciate it, which I did. They have 7 questions here. Number 1, in the course of raising fees for the fire and ambulance, it was said that the money that was generated from the fees would be used for capital improvements, i.e. building, equipment, etc. Why the reduction in the capital line? Number 2, what is the insurance line and why the reduction? Number 3, could the reduction in revenue be explained in more detail? Number 4, why did the net cost of service pre-towns fees increase by $134,804? Number 5, why the increase in the cost per person between the budgeted and projection numbers? Number 6, in 2019, there were only 357 runs to outside communities, which is 13.55% of the total calls. Why are the outside communities paying 37.08% of the fees? It was stated that everyone needs to be paying their fair share. This does not seem like our fair share. Number 7, what was done with the $528,675 in fees collected? Referring to the fees that we have contracted with outside towns. Were these fees used to offset the mill decrease? Questions are collectively from the Town of Woodland Board of Selectmen. Thank you, Amber Matino, Town of Woodland Tax Collector Treasurer.
And you sent the email back to her with all of these answers.
I did respond back with answers to each of those questions. I've also forwarded that same email to the other towns that
Okay.
we had emails for.
Perfect. We do have a letter from Bruce Hagelstein, 34 Coolidge Avenue in Caribou, Maine. This is a letter for City Council meeting on August 10th, 2020. Subject matter is the proposed privatization snow plowing for the City of Caribou. It is my understanding that the bidding process for this task was broken down into 9 categories, which could be bid on separately or any combination thereof. My concern is, I hope the city has done due diligence on their cost of the 9 areas identified in the bidding process. I want to make sure the City Council understands these costs for comparison to the bids. Another concern is what will be the acceptable threshold of savings between city costs and the bid price in order to proceed in accepting a bid. I hope this is not just an exercise for change, prove a point, or discredit Public Works for the excellent job which they do. This whole process of privatizing snow removal has to be based on good, sound business decisions and not emotion. Hopefully, saving thresholds and current costs have been established before any discussion is made on the subject. And we have that under 6C tonight. Danielle, did you receive any more public input? Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on public input? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to...
Your name?
My name is Galen West.
Galen West.
I just want to find out what's going on. And I'd like to ask a question. I'd like to have a raise of hands from everybody. I want to thank you all for going in and check that place out. Can anybody show me by hand how many went in?
Galen, if you have
110.
if you have
110.
public input, have public
Washburn
input.
Street.
But
What's that?
I said if you're going to have public input, we'll have public input, and that item is under 9C.
Well, they didn't want me now.
Well, I do want you now, but we're not going to raise our hands. I mean,
But did anybody go look at the place?
we can bring it up in 9C when we talk about
It was
it.
already... Okay.
Do you have any other?
No, I just want to know what's going on with it.
Okay. Under old business and adoption of ordinances and resolutions, under 9C, we'll be talking about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Galen. Anybody else from the public?
My name is Rose Schaefer. I live at 112 Washburn Street, and I'm here to have my opinion about 110 Washburn Street. Not too sure what's going to happen with it. I know we will find out later, but as far as my opinion goes, I want to state that I believe it should not go back to the previous owners due to them not having the sense to understand that putting electricity in a house that does not have ground wiring is okay. When I was here July 15th, one of my concerns was fire hazard, and the wires are connected to the same pole my house is connected to. And the fence is close to their house on my property line, but close enough to if their house caught on fire, it would send a chain reaction to my house. So whatever happens, I believe it should not go to the previous owners because their intent is to fix it for their son/grandson. And trying to remember what the other thing was. Oh, and if it does not go back to the previous owners, it please change the locks so they don't intrude on there once again. And that's all I really have to say about it.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public care to speak? Hearing none, we'll move back down to 6B, VFW presentation of appreciation to fire, EMS, and police department.
They're not here
Okay,
yet.
we will hold on to that until Roger shows up. Let's go down to 6C, bids for snow plowing services. Dennis.
Councilors, at your request, we put together an RFP for snow plowing services, and the general direction was try to mirror what Presque Isle does down in their community. We looked at how they have theirs set up, and we looked at the different types of streets that we have with in-town streets, in-town highways, country roads, parking lots, snow plowing. The bids were opened on Tuesday last week. We received only one bid for all of the different types of work. We received one bid from Soderbergh Construction for just the parking lots and the parking lot snow removal. The one bid that encompassed all of the work was from Silver Star, and their total bid price was $1.303 million. Soderbergh Construction, just for the parking lot plowing and the parking lot snow removal, came in at $89,350. As we went through this process, the scope of work did not anticipate 100% all services being done by the bidders. And part of the work that was retained by the city staff included, just to list some of these, we talked during the last council meeting about the city continuing to buy the sand and the salt on behalf of the bidder. And so as we look at that cost, it's in the budget this year at $215,000. We also have included in the bid price, or in the bid information, that the city crews would continue to provide snow blowing services into trucks from the windrows alongside the roads. The city would continue to prep the snow dump areas. We'd continue to clear the hydrants. And so we weren't able to, in a sense, dismiss all of the public works employees. There needs to still be some on staff to monitor things. The whole contract was also based on the public works director, Dave Willett, being able to provide direction and guidance throughout the season. And so there is some additional city staff wages and benefits that we need to still be looking at as far as a cost comparison. We also have some city capital costs. Over the last 5 years, the average capital cost related to snow plowing was about $56,000. I know in the staff report that's in the council packet, we had 54. That number is incorrect. That the 3-year average over the last 3 years was about $82,000 a year, with some major equipment and facilities maintenance work coming up. And so if we look at the total bid plus the continued operations of the staff and the elements that we would be retaining in the contract, the total cost for Silver Star to do the work and still have the city staff involved was almost $1.7 million, a little over $1.7 million. The current budget for Public Works, and I've provided a breakdown of the Public Works budget for you in front of you and emailed it out earlier today. We went through their budget and looked at each line item. We assumed that Public Works is doing snow plow related removal and pushing snow 6 months out of the year. So essentially 50% of their budget is all related to that. There are some items of their budget which are 100% snow related, and there's some that are 100% related to road work in the summertime, not related to snow removal and plowing. And so as we went down through all of that list and all the wages and benefits and everything that's in there, The current cost to the city in the Public Works Department is $1.1 million. So at this point, looking at the bids, we put this bid out, we advertised it in newspapers from Holton to Fort Kent, and we published it 3 times in the paper to make sure that the word got out there. And at this point, based on the responses that we received, we can't recommend that we award this contract to a private company.
Okay.
Dave Willett, Public Works Director, is available through Zoom tonight and can answer any questions you might have if you'd like to do that.
Any questions from the council regarding the snowplow bids? You?
So, if we took this breakdown that you provided, so the pink column somewhat approximates that total cost per year of 1.1. Is that kind of the idea?
Right.
Anything else? You?
Nope, that's it.
Intended this to be a first read for tonight. So now that everybody sees the numbers and everybody can chew on it, I'd like to give this 2 weeks to our next council meeting and have it placed under the agenda under bid awards, recognition, and appointments. Is that okay with fellow councilors?
Yep.
Good with me.
Okay.
We need to make a
Motion.
formal motion to table then. If
Yeah.
that's what you-
Chair would entertain a motion to table this discussion to the next scheduled council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? No. 3. Those opposed? 2.
So it doesn't pass. We need to have 4 to.
Okay. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept these figures and leave the Public Works Department with the snow plowing, leave it as it is. Don't hire any outside.
Second.
Second. It's been moved by Joan, seconded by Nicole. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Now what, Dennis?
Same.
At this point, they both failed.
Status quo.
Basically just stays the same.
Okay. I think we have Roger Felix out in the wings. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, council members, for your time. Allow us to do this small presentation. Earlier this spring, we wanted to do a dinner for all the first responders from Caribou North. Due to COVID, that got shot down in the wind. So we thought at a minimum, we want to appreciate these good people in person, and we're going to go from town to town and do this throughout the next month or so. So without further ado, if I can get the chiefs to come up here. So what we did is got a hold of this artist called No Greater Love, and we wanted so you guys could put these in your homes, so all your people, and let you know that we really appreciate everything that the first responders do for the citizens, but more importantly our veterans. We know you guys have a lot of veterans on your crews, and we appreciate their continued service to our community. So this one says VFW Caribou salutes Caribou Police Department 2020. We backed the blue, which is a good thing. I know that there's nationwide, there's You know, there's a lot of turmoil out there, but just to let you know that we got your back.
Appreciate it.
We got to put our uniforms back on. We got to get a couple extra buttons, but this is for the fire. You know, firemen running into a burning building, this statement is very true. Greater love hath no other man than to put his life on the line for another. That holds true in the military, but it also holds true in the real world in the fire department. So Caribou VFW salutes Caribou Fire and Ambulance 2020. We got your 6. Yeah. We get a picture of it. Dave, why don't you get in between? You got all the shots. Take your thing off your ear, Dave. I say you got all the shots, but that was many years ago. I don't think more on. Thank you so much, and we appreciate it.
Roger, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Roger. Thank you, Roger. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiefs.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate everything you do. Okay. Item 7, financials. 7A, presentation of 2019 audit report. Dennis.
Counselor, I'm going to invite the Finance Director, Carl, to introduce this, if he would.
Thank you, Dennis. I'd just like to start off by saying it was a pleasure to work with Giselle and her staff from Felch Company. The process was a little different due to COVID, but we were able to finalize the audit in a timely fashion. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce CPA Giselle McDonald, please.
Thank you. As he said, my name is Giselle McDonald, for those of you that don't know me. I've got some highlights here for the audit. I'm going to go over them. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm assuming everybody has a copy of the report, and there are page numbers there, thanks to Gary Aiken, that were added to these a number of years ago. So the first thing that's important to point out is that it's a clean opinion on the financial statements. The audit opinion is on pages 1, 2, and 3, and it basically says that the financial statements are fairly stated as presented. I'd like to jump to Exhibit A. Exhibit A is on page 9. And there are... Excuse me. Okay. Is that better? Okay. I can hear myself, but I can't hear what's coming out of the speakers. So Exhibit A is the statement of net position. There are a couple of different presentations here. The first presentation includes financial statements for the city as though it was a business. We include the capital assets, we include the long-term debt in the assets and liabilities. So we have total assets of $28.5 million. We have liabilities and deferred outflows, which are essentially deferred revenues, totaling about $2 million, leaving net equity of about $26.3 million. Almost $8 million of this is unrestricted. So the balance of this equity of $18 million is tied up in non-liquid assets, things like roads and buildings and equipment, things like that. Exhibit B is your statement of activities. Think of this as the income statement. We start with the expenses and then we work down to the revenue. So the total expenses for the year were about $16.3 million. There were program revenues that offset these expenses of almost $4 million, leaving a net cost to be satisfied by general revenues of about $12.5 million. The general revenues, that includes the property taxes, the municipal revenue sharing, things like that, of about $12.5 million, resulting in a very stable net asset. It did increase slightly by just under $100,000. We move on to Exhibit C. We have another balance sheet. This is our fund balance sheet. And it's dealing with resources that are cash or going to turn into cash. It's more of the current financial resources focus. So we've omitted the capital assets, the long-term debt, things like that. We have total assets of about $9.6 million, liabilities and deferred revenue of about $1 million, leaving net equity of $8.5 million. Exhibit D on the following page is a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Again, this is on the fund financial statements. It's the current financial resources. We have almost $17 million in revenues, about $16.3 million in total expenditures, resulting in an increase in fund balance of $658,000. Exhibits E and F are presented to compare the two sets of exhibits A and B to C and D. And it's basically saying that the differences are related to the capital assets and the long-term debt and the way they're presented. The city also has some fiduciary funds, various trust funds that it is in charge of, and those assets total just under $170,000. We have notes to the financial statements, notes and disclosures. There's some descriptions on the accounting policies, some more detail as to various assets and liabilities. I'm happy to go over those if anybody has any questions, but for the sake of time, we'll skip those for now. Many pages there. Let's see. The next page of interest would be your budgetary comparison schedule on page 29. It's called Supplement 1. So we had total budgeted revenues of $14.6 million, and our actual revenues came in at just about $14.6 million, so very close there. The budgeted expenditures were just over $14.5 million, and the actual came in at $14.6, so very close. We had a very stable budgetary fund balance. The next thing and the last thing I'd like to point out, the type of audit that we do for the city is a compliance audit because of the level of federal funding that it receives. So I'm happy to report that there were no findings in connection with that compliance audit. We looked at internal controls over compliance as well as compliance with significant grants, and we had no compliance issues. So any questions for me on any of this?
Councilors, do you have any questions for Giselle?
Not today. We need some time to
Digest it, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, our contact information should be available to you from the accounting staff, and if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to call us. Sherry or myself can answer, hopefully.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much,
All right.
Giselle. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
the hard work you guys do down there.
Okay. Thank you.
Just also highlight that the audit report is available on the city's website under the finance department. Only a couple links into the page, so easy to access if anybody else wants to review that. Carl, I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on tonight with regards to the audit.
Item 8, new business. A, liquor license renewal for Jade Palace Restaurant at 30 Skyway Drive. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Joan Terrio, second by Councillor Jody Smith. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. 8B, liquor license extension for Moscato's Italian Restaurant at 6 Center. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Kirkpatrick, second by Councillor Terrio. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Item 8C, Facade Improvement Grant Program Guidelines. Dennis.
Councilors, during our last meeting, we had some discussions about the facade improvement grant funds. This is a state authorized or approved use of TIF funds within the downtown TIF district. And these guidelines have been drafted with the hope to modify and to tighten up the process by which those funds are considered for use. The guidelines are basically, we would go through a standard process every year of advertising the availability of those funds. We now have a deadline by which applicants need to turn in their request for the funds. And as we go through the process, we've also outlined that certain types of projects or requests would only be eligible for a certain amount of those funds. Under the current guidelines, as we looked at those, looks like I need to update my PDF file for everybody on the screen. But under the current guidelines, it says that up to $7,500 is available per project, or 50% of the project, and that it didn't give any real guidance for where or how the city might say we think it's only eligible for a certain amount, rather than just keeping it open at full 7,500 or 50%. And so we built in some very specific review criteria that at least it's, when I say specific review criteria, I mean more that we've at least provided the reviewing committee some guidelines to look at. What is the visibility of the project? What is its visual impact? What is its contribution to the downtown area? Has the person received a grant in the past? And so those are some things that we've incorporated into it. The guidelines also now specify that there will be a review committee that looks at these. It's not just left up to the city manager to review and approve. So there's more eyes on the use of these funds than previously in there. And let me stop talking and get it pulled up so I can speak to it more directly. The overall formatting and pulling this all together was done by Christina, who's been involved with facade improvement grants and with her previous employment as well. And so some of the things that we looked at, it still is a 50-50 match. We still have a cap on the amount of funds. As I said, eligible projects, this is a little more specific as to which type of projects are eligible. If we're looking at repairs or improvements to exterior siding, cleaning, repointing or removing paint, replacing windows, doors, fresh coats of paint, signage enhancements, decorative or privacy fencing. It was pointed out to us by our city assessor that fencing is considered a taxable piece of property. And so the point is we ought to include that as a type of project that's eligible for these funds. The maximum city contribution toward projects, this I think is maybe more where we need some more, is the council comfortable with these numbers? If it's a major facade restoration, up to $7,500. If it's a new coat of paint, up to $2,000. Signage enhancements, up to $1,500. Sign face changes, up to $750. Fencing, up to $2,000. One of the things with the signage that we looked at, we've had applications in the past where somebody was just changing out the face of a sign. And I guess as we talked about as a group, and my personal feelings are that a sign enhancement, so where you could say this is truly an enhancement to the area, would be something like doing some masonry skirting, ornamental lighting, doing something that adds more to the sign feature rather than just changing out the face. But we do have a category here for just a sign face change would be eligible for $750. The program requirements, they still have to follow the building codes that the city's adopted. We still, under the previous standards, they had to have their work designed by a qualified design professional, which we left in there. The signs would have to comply with the sign standards that the city has adopted, as well as DOT if it's along a highway. They're not eligible for TIF funds if they've been accredited to this building. They have to provide their estimates for their work, and funds are dispersed only after completion of the approved work and documentation is received by the city. This is intended to be a reimbursement grant, not a seed grant, okay? We do have in here, Christina thought would be important that once a project's done, we promote that and have ribbon cutting ceremonies and other media spots to promote the program and opportunities. The review process, as I mentioned, we've added these bullet points that the review committee will consider, that projects that demonstrate the greatest overall need or urgency, permanent structures, buildings with high visibility, the materials that are being used, contribution to placemaking in the downtown, something that is it truly adding to the ambiance, the character of the downtown area, consistency with the comprehensive plan. Does it promote or enable business retention and expansion capabilities? Is it helping with the wayfinding assistance? Are they using local labor for the work? Applicants who do not receive did they receive the funding in the previous grant cycle? If we get a bunch of applicants in one cycle, basically it's indicating we can say, well, you got some last year, we're going to spread this around to somebody new. And also blight remediation is considered. We should probably jump back up. The review committee, as it's laid out now, would be a looks like we got a typo already, we need to correct. Would be a 5-member committee, a member of the city council, the Caribou Downtown team, a member of the Caribou Economic Growth Council, the Caribou Planning Board, and the city marketing director, with myself and code enforcement officers and a building official advising the committee if any issues come up. The committee would meet, and based on the review criteria, they could grant the awards. The awards would not have to come back to the city council. So the procedure, the applications deadline would be March 15th of each year. As I said, we'd advertise it, and we have our list of businesses, over 300 businesses that we'd send this out to and promote. The limitation is, of course, that it has to be done within the downtown TIF district, according to the program. So we share this with you tonight. If you've got any other questions or thoughts, we can incorporate into this before a formal stamp of approval on the guidelines.
Any questions, council?
Can you go back to the criteria? So, is that going to be some kind of scoring system, or?
The thought was you got, I think, 10 bullets there, and each bullet would have a score of 1 to 5, and each of the committee members would say, in my opinion, this is a 5 or a 3, and be able to pull together a scoring at the end. Part of when you start to get into some of these government grant processes, they start to require so much detail and analysis in the application process. It costs you almost as much to prepare the application as to try to get the grant. You're trying to make this a simple process. You know, if we were to say we're only going to review these things on a hierarchical review criteria, or say you have to give us actual budget numbers and tons of other things and demonstrate how many jobs and all this, sometimes that can be very cumbersome and actually scare people away from actually coming to the funds. So we're trying to not do that.
What's
Councilor
wayfinding
Terrio?
assistance?
So wayfinding assistance, that's like your signage that is downtown,
Oh,
or
okay.
it says something's this way. Sometimes the states have signs on the side of the highway that will point people to a business.
Okay, that's good.
Things that help people get their bearings where they are.
Anyone else? So this will be placed under old business in the next meeting. Okay. Item 8D, discussion and possible action regarding sale of city-owned property at 32 Fenderson. Dennis.
Councilors, this is an item that we feel it would be appropriate to have discussion in executive session first before any action is taken on it. If we can table that to later on
Yeah.
in the meeting.
Let's table that to executive session.
We do also, since we've looked at liquor licenses on this agenda, I want to let the council know we received another liquor license application on Saturday. Obviously, we weren't open for business, but it was delivered. It's for the Northern Maine Brewing Company. They're looking for an extension of their license as well, similar to what the Moscato's is doing.
I thought we already did that. They're allowed to serve alcohol outside.
This is pertaining to different dates and times. So
We have no information in the packet. I mean,
these are, I know the process is get it on the agenda and get it out. And I know with the Moscato's application, we had a similar issue that the business was saying, well, if the city would just approve it, I could move forward. I don't have to wait 2 weeks. We didn't receive the application until very late. In this case, it's a very similar thing. All the departments have signed off on it. I know it's not on your agenda. This may be one of those times, if the council will allow us to administratively handle it, we could put it on your next agenda for a ratification of the administrative action on it.
I'll take any discussion from council.
Well, I personally wouldn't have a problem with a notice to proceed with, on some of these things, with just the formality of the council voting 2 weeks later. I mean, if it falls in our lap, everyone on the city side has done their due diligence, so I don't really see why just meeting dates should hold these things up. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, this is something that, you know what? Chief Susi says it's okay. Chief Gahagan says it's okay. You guys say it's okay. I think this is something we need to look at in the charter. If everybody's copacetic with having a certain business have a liquor license, let them have it. Why does it have to come to us? I think we're burning calories that just don't need to be burned, So, would you check into that?
It would require an ordinance change. It's not a charter change.
It's an ordinance change.
It would be an ordinance change we'd have to adopt. As far as tonight, if the council would give us the directive to move forward,
Okay.
we could put it on your next agenda for ratification.
If I could make a suggestion, maybe for the ordinance, it would be, the renewal only makes it to a council level if the city departments do have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that somehow has to get hashed out
Yeah.
here. But otherwise, if it's
Routine.
if we're just checking boxes, I agree with Tommy. It's really kind of a waste of our time.
By state law, really the only thing that has to come to you is a new liquor license, and we have to do a public hearing. But
So be it. Yeah.
these types of things, yes, we can amend the ordinance. You never have to see it.
So tonight we'll Chair will entertain a motion to accept the liquor license, providing that in 2 weeks we have to ratify it.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Terrio, second by Nicole.
Okay.
I heard her first.
Okay.
She's closer.
Sure.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. 9A, Resolution 0701-2020, a resolution amending the 2020 expense and capital budget. Dennis.
Councilors, this was on your last agenda for discussion. As a first read, this is being brought back for final action. This, again, stems from the mill rate discussion that we had and even the find $170,000 in the budget to make things balance out. So I don't know if there's any questions about the items that are listed in the resolution to cut. If the council adopts this, then we're able to provide that to the finance department. They amend it in the budget system, in our software, and we move forward. If you have any questions.
Questions from council?
Motion to adopt Resolution 7/1/2020.
Second.
Motion made by Councillor Kirkpatrick, seconded by Councillor Smith. Any discussion?
I'm just going to say it one more time. I don't think that we should be cutting anything. I think the mill rate that was cut was too aggressive, and we're just going to push us down the road to next year, and I don't think that we should make any cuts. I'm not in favor of this at all. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Terrio. Any other discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed?
Councilors, we have to find $170,000 in the budget. And the recommendation for here is to pull that first $170,000 out of the capital. I recognize and respect Councilor Terrio's position, but even through the mill rate process, the council identified that we were going to cut $170,000 from the budget.
Well, Dennis, a vote has been had, and
Yeah, rainy day fund.
the way the cookie crumbles tonight. Item 9B, Fire EMS Station Roof Repair Project. Dennis.
As I understood, there was a request to have this back on for a presentation of the council's facility maintenance committee and how they wanted to proceed with this or what they wanted to do with it. I never received an email from the committee chair on that, but I understand that you have, Council Aaron.
So the committee, chaired by Councilor Morrell, we suggest that we move forward with the fire station repairs, as stated by all Sewell. That's what we recommend. Any discussion by council on this?
Is the
Councilor
work still?
Smith? Go ahead.
Is the work still potentially going to get done this year? Is it it's done this season, or is this something that's going to end up in the 2021 season? I mean, in the construction end of it, is it possible to have that done before?
At this point, the bid package has not been prepared to go out. We still need to meet with Sewell and the building committee and refine the scope of the project to make sure what we're putting out to bid is what's going to be in there. Is it going to get done this year? I don't think 100% of the project will. I think we can get it out soon enough. If we're fast, we can get the roof membrane and that stuff done this season. All the other work is internal and could be done over the winter season. With that being the case, some of the budgeting for this year would go towards some of the cost, and in next year's budget, we'd hope to incorporate the remainder of the project cost in next year's budget.
So we could possibly get the roof membrane fixed. Chief, how's that going to affect the flow of ambulances and fire trucks in and out when we have staging? Or
The membrane won't do anything, Councilor.
I know the membrane, but as far as reinforcing everything, the inside work.
I don't know the scope of what they want to do.
Councilor Kirkpatrick.
As I remember the description of the structural work, there was not going to be any new posts.
Yeah.
So it's not going to affect the floor layout.
Okay.
The
All right.
design, right, the structural shoring up that would occur. Basically, they would go into the trusses that are exposed, and even those that are not, and weld additional metal onto those to strengthen them, so they have a little less flexibility. You asked about the staging. There's going to have to be some staging put into the bays in order to get up there and do the welding necessary.
So we're going to take a diesel truck, park it outside at negative 30 degrees. Not with water in it, are you, Chief? So this needs to happen ASAP. In which we all know, when you bid something that needs to happen ASAP, it's going to cost a lot more than what it originally intended. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, because I wasn't at the last meeting. Just what we're basically doing here is we're just deciding on the scope of work that we decided on. It's still going to go to bid and come back to the council for approval.
The bid will still have to come back with the final approval.
We just finally said, well, we had 4 or 5 options, and this is what we've gone with.
I think at this point we're saying we're going to meet with Sewell and we're going to get the bid package prepared and out as fast as we can.
Okay.
Councillor Terrio.
And this will be, the scope of the work that you're going to be doing will be enough to satisfy the insurance company so they don't non-renew that building in July if you're done by then? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the goal is we can insure it. I think that's the goal at this point. So, do you need a formal motion from any one of us in order to go out and talk with Sewell and finalize bid packages?
It's covered under past direction from the council.
Okay. 9C, sale and tax acquired property at 110 Washburn Road for you folks. Dennis.
So I know there's been concern about conveying this property back to the previous owner, not only from the residents who have come in and spoke to the issue, but also a concern from the code enforcement and the building enforcement side of things. To that extent, we've drafted a consent agreement that the council can entertain. Basically, it outlines that in order for the city to convey the property back to Miss Priscilla Austin Glass, she would need to go through a process and demonstrate that she's going to get the building brought up to code so that people can actually live inside of it. The certificate of occupancy has been pulled over the property. And so this consent agreement outlines that she would need to go through a process of having the home inspected and provide copies of those inspection reports back to the city. Along with the inspections, there would need to be estimates for doing the repairs. And once she's provided the inspection reports, the estimates, and also a bond to cover a portion of the work, then the city would quit claim the property back to her. She would also have until the end of November, basically, to get all the repairs done. And if the repairs are not done in a timely fashion, then the city would, or the property would revert back to the city. And we would also be able to claim the bond amount, which we would then apply towards possible demolition or blight removal on the property. We've made many attempts to share this consent agreement ahead of time of this meeting with Ms. Glass and have not been able to touch base with her and make a connection. Tonight, I guess we're asking the council if you're okay with this consent agreement. You know, again, further our efforts to reach out and get in touch with her. If she's agreeable to it and the council is agreeable to it, we move forward with this and executing it. If she's not okay with it, then the city retains the property and we move forward, most likely with it being put on our demolition list.
Question from councilors. Discussion, Councilor Terrio.
I just have one maybe suggestion. You've tried several times. You haven't had any luck getting in touch with her. She hasn't gotten back to you. I don't know how long you expect, you think that this is going to go on, but I would think that you may send her notice or leave her a message if you can and give her a specific time, like maybe a week, say a week from the time that you call her. And if we haven't heard anything by then close the book on it and proceed. I don't think this should be drawn out. I would think that if she really wanted to do this, as she stated last time she was here, that she would have gotten in touch with you and at least talked to you about this agreement. So I think there should be a definite time period.
How many attempts have you guys? I assume Ken. Have you made attempts, or Dennis, or who has?
Only 5 notices go out to that property by 4 different officers of the city. We reached out on many occasions for our concerns regarding.
Over the past 2 weeks.
We've used the phone numbers that we had available. We even, dare I say, Facebook stalked her to get her information that way, to try to reach out.
You're going to add that one to your resume?
Right. And still no response.
To me,
She's not.
I think we've given this property owner plenty of time. And, I mean, with Galen's testimony last time, and today, and Rose, and yours as well, ma'am. I mean, to me, what we're trying to do, and what the council has given Dennis and other members of the city directive, is that we're tax acquiring these properties, but it costs us so much money to demo them. If somebody had a property and they went to go demo it, the asbestos removal and all of the other removal costs about half of what it costs the city to do it. So we're finding that we have a lot of properties in Caribou that have been tax acquired, and what are we at? $17,000 to $20,000 to demo this house? Is that kind of the general area we're in? I mean, past houses. I mean, guesstimate, guys.
The last house we did was $8,900.
$8,900. Okay. So, and we don't know what can of worms we're going to get to when we get to this house. There might be asbestos removal there. So, what we're trying to do, it's not that we're putting you guys on the back burner. We're not. We're trying to figure out how we can do this in the best of a way to make demoing this house the cheapest for the taxpayers. And that's been something we've been working on for a better part of a year and a half to try to figure this out. At this point, it's my opinion that we've given these landowners plenty of time. They've ignored they've ignored any sort of warnings we've put on the building as far as you can't go in here. And so far as saying that certain city's employees said we did this and we can do this, and we find out it's not true. So the chair will entertain a motion on this item.
I would make a motion to close the book on this, that they've had enough time, and to proceed with whatever you need to do to demolish or whatever.
Okay. So, sorry, I needed just a second and then discussion.
What was that?
There needs to be a second and then discussion.
Yes, correct. Nice. Motion made by Councillor Terrio, seconded by Councillor Kirkpatrick. Discussion. Dennis wants to discuss
He
something.
wants to.
So at this point, the previous owner they have provided funds toward the payment of all past taxes owed and estimated taxes for this year. Based on the motion, then
We have to
I would assume that we would then give those funds back to the previous owner.
return. Yeah.
And as we work towards the demolition of the property, I know there's always going to be the concern that what do we do with the taxes on the books? And the council need to decide at some point, are we abating the taxes, or are we demolition it and then we put it back out to bid and hope we can recoup some of those taxes?
That's been the MO for so long, and again, this is one of those deals we're trying to work through. What is our procedure on this whole deal? So, and I think the council has screeched to the high heavens on how to deal with this, but sometimes it just seems like it falls on deaf ears. I mean, So, there's been a motion. Second. Any other discussion?
Do you want me to amend the motion to give back the...
Just to make it clear that that's the intent.
Okay. I'll amend the motion. I'll make a motion to close the book on this, proceed with the demolition, return the tax money that's been paid to Priscilla Glass, and after the demolition, everything is done, we can put it back on the list of properties to be sold.
So moved. For a second. Sorry.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, we really don't allow this, but I'll allow it this time, Rose.
For my safety, will the locks be changed or have they been changed?
The locks.
The locks?
The locks.
Will they be changed or have they been changed?
There's been some rough looking people on that property.
We're going to have to go through a process now of notifying the previous owner, giving them time to get all of their personal things out of the building that they want to get out. And then after that time frame is done, we can go through and change the locks and do what we need to.
What time frame are you going to give?
I believe it's 30 days.
Control burns.
Looking for Chief Gahagan, but we have to give them a 30-day window to go in and remove any personal items that they want.
So it's 12 days?
It's 30 days.
It's 30 days.
Can we change the locks and they schedule that and the PD goes with them to get their belongings or something of that nature?
Yeah, it sounds like there's a safety issue that's going on here. Is that
I'll
something?
check with Chief Gahagan and
Yeah.
see if that's an option.
If it's an option, then keep us apprised of it. Just email us. Because I think as a safety aspect, that would be something that,
Really, they're trespassing.
absolutely.
It's ours.
It is ours.
Right.
But we have to give them a chance to get out their personal belongings. That's the deal with it. So,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
All those in favor? Unanimous.
Could I make one suggestion after now about the policy? Should we-
Absolutely. Because we're going right to reports and discussion by mayor and council members. Item 10. Councilor Terrio.
Could we perhaps have a workshop or something and go over the policy of what we've been doing here? Set it in stone so there's no question as to how properties like this are going to be handled in the future and we don't run into this again. I guess it may, I don't know if you need to do an ordinance or anything to change or is it just a policy change?
It was adopted as a policy, so it's best to have it modified by resolution of the council.
Okay.
Everybody go to the workshop to do that?
Yeah, I am, because actually I thought this was a pretty good solution, but because these people have never reached back to us
Right.
in that time frame, that's why
Yeah,
I went forward with it.
But set it in policy that,
if they'd
you know.
come forward.
I told it to Dennis last
think-
week. We've got to be proactive on
Right.
some of these things. And I get the first reads, and there's a reason for first reads. And that way everybody can get the information and go from there. But, we need to start being a little proactive on this stuff. So I make a motion, today's 10th. If we do a workshop on the 19th of August, it's a Wednesday. Does Wednesday work for everyone? A week from today, Monday, that just doesn't work for me, guys. Just can't.
I have a conflict with that night.
Yeah, I do too.
You do? Okay.
I do too, I think.
Why don't we play this? Why don't we play this by ear? Can you put out a couple dates in an email, Dennis? How much notice do we have to give of a workshop?
24 hours.
24 hours, okay. 17th's out, 19th's out. So we have 18th, 20th, 18th, yeah, okay. I have a USDA audit that day, but sure, why not? 18th, 20th, 21st. I guess those dates.
So the purpose of this is to,
Yeah.
before we get into the lien process and acquiring properties for this year, that we've clarified some things.
Yep. Any other discussion by counselors? Hearing none. 11, City Manager's Report. Let's start with the Fire EMS Related Rates Report. Hey, Dennis.
Councilors, this is in your packet. This was at the request of Councilor Dorn to have a summary report of now that the 2019 audit is done, where we're at as far as the cost for services to outlying communities. And so in the report, page 32 of your packet, you'll see that in 2019, our coverage area included half of Wade, Washburn, up to Stockholm, Madawaska Lake, and Connor. There was a population that was served of 11,436 residents. Caribou's portion of that was 69%. In 2020, our service area shifted, where we picked up the communities of Limestone and Caswell. We dropped the community of Parham, and Wade and Washburn also dropped their contract with us. But even though we dropped communities, picking up Limestone and Caswell resulted in an increase to the population being served. We're now at 12,623 people being served in the service area. The 2019 fees, they varied for the fire service. The ambulance service was $11.50 per person. So the combined fees per town varied depending on how those were set up with the fire department. The 2020 fees were established by the council for fire service at $50 per person, ambulance $100 per person, or if somebody did them both, $125 per person. The 2019 financials, according to the 2019 financials, our fire department, I should state again that our Department 31 funds are combined funds. We don't break them out by fire and EMS department. We went through the exercise last year of looking at a general cost breakdown of what expenses were fire related versus EMS related, and we've just continued some of those same proportionalities through with this analysis. So from an operational standpoint, the total budget in 2019 was $2.26 million. Fire was roughly 17% of that, and EMS was $1.876 million of that. We had capital projects in 2019 with the fire accounting for a portion of those capital costs and EMS the other portion. The fire department still has an engine that's being paid for at $116,000 a year, plus the debt service on the pellet boilers that they have. And so you'll see that the debt service for the fire department is $121,000, but for the EMS department was only $21,000 for the year. When we look at the revenue that was generated by the fire and EMS, not counting contracted amounts with outside communities, the revenue generated by the fire department was a little over $5,000, and the EMS department was a little over $1.3 million. The insurance line, this is one of the questions that Woodland asked, is what does this insurance line represent? This represents the revenues from billed ambulance services. So really insurance is a little bit inappropriate because we do have some private pay individuals in that number, but for the most part, these are insurance revenues that we receive from building services. The other account in 2019. So this includes the ambulance building services that we had contracted with other communities on, and the monies that we were receiving there, as well as other permits and fees that we issue throughout the year. So the net cost before any revenue came in from our surrounding towns, for fire, the net cost was negative $516,000. For EMS, negative $657,000, for a total net of negative $1.174 million. From a regional standpoint, when we look at the population that is being served by the fire department, not all of the towns on the previous map receive our fire service. And so only 9,729 people receive the fire service. Again, from a regional standpoint, that translates to each person being responsible for roughly $53 of the net loss from the department. On the EMS side, we have more people that were benefiting from the EMS service, and the regional cost again was looking at $57.50 roughly. So the total, the way our billing system, or the way our contracts are set up, if you have both of those services, you would have paid both of those fees, so roughly $110 per person. But on the average, if everybody in the region was taking both of those services, we have our net cost and our population, so you're roughly $103 per person. As we look at the revenue that was generated from contracts with outside communities, the fire contracts generated almost $129,000 for a total revenues of almost $134,000 in the fire department side. On the EMS side, total revenues with towns was $1.35 million. And so altogether, the revenues was $1.483 million. As we look at the cost then, once you take you have the expenses and the total revenues, anything that's remaining is what Caribou is in a sense left holding the bag. And so the cost to Caribou for fire service in 2019 was $387,000, almost $388,000. For EMS, a little over $610,000, combined total being just under $1 million of cost for both services. In 2019, one of the issues that was identified was that the cost to Caribou's residents, based on our population, was almost according to these numbers, was $131 per person, whereas the cost to outside communities was about $15 per person. That's some of the argument for why we needed to rebalance the fee structure and looking at the fees that we're charging to other communities to participate in the service. At the bottom of this spreadsheet, we've also included that this is one of the numbers that outside communities like to look at and try to focus on primarily, is that the Caribou portion of the net cost was a little over 75% for fire, and we made 88% of the calls for fire. Under the EMS side, again, this is just in 2019, Caribou was covering almost 93% of the EMS cost, and we were making 86% of the runs for the year. Altogether, the city's net cost for the total service was about 85%, and we were making 86% of all of the calls between fire and EMS. In 2020, when we look at what's been budgeted in 2020, as things play out, you'll have the regional cost per person. I won't walk you through all of these numbers, and just to indicate that the regional cost per person in the budget was $102 per person, with Caribou residents paying a little over $100 per person according to the budget. The contracts that we have for EMS, outside communities were paying almost $478,000 for it combined between fire and EMS, looking about $118 per person to outside communities. The portion of the net costs, as we look at if the 2019 numbers held true for 2020, the way that this would play out is Caribou is now covering almost 91% of the fire cost relative to the 88% of the fire calls, but Caribou is covering 35.7% of the EMS cost with 86% of the calls. With those being combined, Caribou is covering 60% of the cost of all of the service, but still looking at 86% of all the calls for the service. This is one of the questions that Woodland posed, was this difference between actual usage versus the population. In fact, one of the responses that I sent to Woodland today, let me just read this, if I might. The question was, if in 2019 there were only 357 runs to outside communities, which is 13.55% of the total calls, why are the outside communities paying 37% of the fees? It was stated that everyone needs to be paying their fair share. This does not seem like our fair share. My response to that was, from a population standpoint, Caribou has 62.3% of the service population. Thus, 37.7% of the service population is paying 37.1% of the cost for the services. The simple proportionality equation based on population was used when establishing the current fee structure. It is recognized that many other factors could be incorporated into those fees, such as billable runs, non-use call-outs, community valuation, demographics, resident income, regional smoothing and uniformity, etc. There's still concern from the outlying communities of, is the fee structure fair, I guess, from their standpoint. And that gets into the discussion of, are we really moving toward a regional system in which everybody is truly paying the same everywhere? Or are we looking at still maintaining a service that's being provided by one community to other communities? And how is that one community being able to cover their costs? There's still a lot of discussion that needs to take place, I think, in this regard. And definitely tonight, we're not going to solve all of the issues. But one of the other things that I included in this report is based on so we had the budgeted numbers for 2020, and as the year has progressed, we've been able to look at where we're at with the revenues, what's happening with that, and of course, there was discussion tonight about changing some of the capital, which was defeated tonight. Under the amended budget or the amended revenue projection scenario, we're looking currently at almost $200,000 of loss in revenue within the department, primarily due to less runs, less calls for service, and therefore less billings that can go out. Under the scenario before the meeting that we had, the outside communities, because their contract amounts are set and their population values are set, again, they were looking at a cost per person of about $118. With the revised revenues, the only way to make up a reduction in revenues is for the city of Caribou to cover additional costs, if you will. And so, because there's additional coverage by the Caribou residents, that increases our cost of recovering. And so our net cost per person now is starting to look at closer to what the outlying communities are paying at almost $118, a little over that per person. So overall, we're just presenting the numbers for you tonight. I know I think all of the outlying communities would like to have a work session with the City Council to talk about where do we go from here. Are some changes possible? What might be the impacts of a regional system? I think we need to recognize that there are pros and cons to every community, even Caribou, for a regional system. I asked Chief Susie to put together some general pros and cons for us to look at. I don't know if you have that here tonight.
I have it with me. I do have it. It's on my computer.
I think that's the plan. I think is that how I discussed it with you was that we were going to present the numbers tonight. That way, all the communities have it. We as a council have it. All the citizens of all the communities, including ours, has it. Next meeting, we're going to have to change a venue. We're not going to be able to have everybody here. Rather have to go to the CPAC or the rec department.
Right.
And everybody's going to come, and it's going to be one late night. Because everybody has a lot of questions about this. So, and I think Mayor Gahn will be here. He's the one who asked for this report. And we're going to hash it out there.
The last slide in the report, one of the reasons why it is good to bring this up now is that the fire and EMS contracts for 2020 have automatic renewal provisions in them. So they don't have to keep coming back to the council or the select boards for those to be extended. But if there is a desired change in the contracts, either through prices or provisions, then those changes have to be brought forward at least 90 days before the contract term. So before December 31st. That means that really tonight this is a good jumping off point for discussions. It gives us roughly a month and a half that we can have some of these discussions and see if anything, or if there's any changes desired on either side.
So I would suggest that we look at a change of venue for the next meeting and get the notices out to surrounding town selectmen and councilors, and that way we can all meet and take care of this.
Do we want to have a special work session just for this topic rather than put it on the next agenda? I think that's maybe my recommendation.
I think that I'd reach out. That's kind of the mayor's decision. I know he's not here tonight, but I think that's a decision he needs to make. He called for the report, so I think that's a decision he needs to make. Now, if he's still out of action, then we can have a workshop. I have no problem. Does anybody else have a problem with having a workshop?
Not for this.
So look at our wonderful calendar. It's just, well, if we have it next week, I mean, you're going to have a workshop day? You're going to feed us lunch?
We could. We could. I know you're all busy and certainly late nights.
Yeah, vegetables don't stop growing. So this is, we were elected to do this job. That means that sometimes we have to, take time out of our own personal lives, and because that's what we were elected to do. And that's what we're going to do. So if we have to do a work session Tuesday and do another one on Thursday, Tuesdays and Thursdays, not have to do it. So
we'll reach out to the other communities and try to get a majority.
Yeah, this isn't, and this may be something that doesn't happen next week because we're going to have a lot of people. and it's all going to be copacetic with everybody's schedule. So I'd reach out to the other communities.
I mean, do we have to have it this month? Yeah.
We, if we're within, we have until September 31st, or September 30th, excuse me, to figure this out, the other towns. I think having, if we don't have it next week, the week after. But I'd like to give the other communities a chance to look at this and be apprised of all the information you just gave us, the questions that Town of Woodland have given. So I think, if we do it next week, the week after, I'd like to do it sooner rather than later, is my suggestion. So that way they have all September to really decide what they would like to do. So
What they propose, they would like to do, correct?
yeah, what they propose they'd like to do.
Or they say yes, or this is what we offer.
Well, look, 90-day provision for changing or cancellations. You have September 30th. October 1 hits, automatically renews. Right?
It automatically renews January 1st,
January 1st, okay.
but everybody's supposed to submit changes or cancellations by September 30th. That way we know from our budget standpoint. what we need
So
to do.
after September 30th, they could still cancel if they'd want to.
We'll have to look at what kind of provisions there are. But
Okay, that's something that needs to be brought up because we're trying to make a timeline for everybody.
Right.
So, and everybody's going to be on the same page. Okay, so if it's October 1st, we've got a plan, they've got a plan, everybody's got a plan. And their budgets, expensive revenues, all of it. So if it's October 1st, or is it January 1st?
By the strict application of the contract, if they don't give us the 90-day notice for changes or cancellations, then you're right. It's going to be in effect for the next year.
Okay. Councillor Smith.
Have these other towns and cities, have they reached out to us and want to do this, or is what's driving this to have this again? I mean, has Woodland sent us an email, obviously. Has there been other concerns, I mean, from the other communities? I'm just curious.
We had a call from Caswell, we had a call from Sweden, we had a call from Stockholm. Once the report went out to them, yes, they want to talk about it.
Yeah, of course, and rightfully so.
Just the last thing to bring up with this report, based on the population numbers that we're seeing, if the contracts do not change, as far as the fee amounts, the fees are based on the populations of the communities. And the estimates that we're getting is that the populations are dropping, which means then that our contracts, the revenues we're getting from those contracts, would also drop slightly. So it's just something to be mindful of as we look at the budget process coming up.
Any other questions from councillors on this? All right, Dennis. More city managers report stuff and things.
I think some of the major highlights that we have, the bird cleanup is in full swing. We were able to get into the areas that were identified as concern areas. We opened up a lot of those mounds, and what we found was the one really messy pile that had all the junk in it that we could see from the surface was full of a lot of messy junk and debris. But most of it was inert material, meaning it wasn't hazardous. And so Public Works with McGillans was able to haul off, I'd say, 90% of that pile. There are still some parts of it. We did identify what, at least from the layperson's observation, would be some asbestos on the site. So we know that there is additional picking through that pile we'll have to do. And certainly would make application for brownfield funding to help do that. The area on the south end of the property, the largest area, we found that those mounds were primarily dirt and rocks. Some of the byproduct of the old potato operation that was there. People picked up a rock they thought was a potato and it rolled off the assembly line, and there was enough of them, they started to pile them up on the property along with some of the dirt. So we found dirt fines, wannabe potato piles, and natural mounds on most of the property. So again, there was a little bit of scattering of concrete here and there, some asphalt, but again, inert material. The process that we went through, roughly we spent about $10,000 or committed about $10,000, but having gone through this process, we probably saved the city $500,000 or more in potential cleanup costs on the site.
Good.
So
Good.
Definitely a positive for us right now. I know we're already starting to lag on the time. I wanted to have tonight I want to highlight that the Northern Maine Development Commission was awarded a $500,000 micro loan grant, which small businesses can apply for those funds, and it can help pay some of their existing loans off. So if there's businesses out there that would be interested in those funds, get a hold of an MDC and see how they might be able to help you with that. There was a discussion earlier this week that the school district was investigating the potential use of the rec center for expansion of school space, classroom space. They've since determined that it would not meet their needs based on the amount of bathrooms and space that was available. That wasn't in the city manager's report in the write-up, but I want to let the council know we were having discussions that way. I don't know if there's anything else that the council has as far as the report goes that you want to talk about. That's all we need.
Any questions for the manager? Council? Seeing none. Item 12, reports by staff and appointed officials. Anybody from staff, appointed officials like to? Chief, do you have anything? You just giving me the peace sign? Okay, fair enough.
I would like to draw the council's attention to a memo from our finance director, Carl Grant, about the investment options on the $3 million CD. We've talked about that in the past, and the interest rates that we were seeing with that. In the council packet, you'll find we went out to bid with each of the local finance institutions, and the results that we got back were the best rate that we could find was a 5-year rate at 1.5%, and that was if we had invested the full amount in that particular institution. We also asked them to give us a bid if we broke it out in increments of $750,000 for 3 years, $750,000 for 4 years, and $1.5 million for 5 years. Again, the best rate that we saw was the 5-year rate on $1.5 million at 1.5. The 4-year rate, the best rate that we saw was at 1.33%, and the 3-year rate at 1.2%. Based on the investment policy that the council has adopted in the past, it is left to our finance director to invest those funds appropriately, and it's his recommendation at this point that rather than put that large amount of money in a long-term investment of only 1.5%, that we would be better off in the short term and potentially in the long term to pull the money out of the CDs or let those mature and put the money into our checking account, which receives a 1.33% annual interest rate. But we will monitor the investment rates each week and see how things are progressing. Everybody's claiming that come the second week of November, something's gonna happen. We don't know for sure, like anybody else, but the concern is if we put 1.5 million or the 3 million, or 1.5% for a long term, we may be missing out on an opportunity. The current rate that we've been getting is 3%. So the hope is that we can eventually get better than the 1.5%.
Okay. Is this something that the finance committee should look at first, and then us?
We have been looking at it, and this was what we've been
What you
discussing.
guys recommended?
This is what we recommended to vote to this. We haven't made a recommendation.
You haven't
What we
made a
got back.
recommendation what to do.
On what to do. We could have a brief meeting with it. Make a
I would
recommendation to council.
I would suggest that happen. Just one of, well, 6 of us right now. 2, 4, 5 of us, excuse me.
If you've got any other direction you want to have, it's, again, we've been following the policy that was adopted by the council. So
Yeah, I mean, okay. Put it on the agenda for next meeting. We'll figure it out.
the investment policy,
No, what to do with this money. Either take it out of our CDs and put it in a checking account, or leave it in at 1.5.
again, at this point, the policy and the authority that's been given to the finance director, his recommendation is to just pull it out right now. That means that we still have open flexibility to do with it something in the future. Right now, it will just be coming out into the checking account.
Okay, if we're going to discuss something like this, it needs to be an agenda item. It just can't come to us in...
It's a report.
It's a report, yeah, but we need to, what we're going to do with it. Because I don't know if pulling it out and putting it into a checking account, I mean, which checking account? Are we going to make our own checking? Are we going to make another checking account for it so we can have a line item so we can monitor this money? Or is it just going to go into a checking account somewhere?
The intent was to create a separate account with just these funds in it, so we can.
Okay.
Just a quick question on that. When was the last time we did this? I thought I went to the council vote. When's the investment policy updated?
And that's a good point. And it is
I
supposed to
mean-
come back to you, so certainly we can bring the investment policy back for the council to discuss.
Councillor Kirkpatrick?
Are you asking us to vote on this, or just, oh, okay.
Okay.
No, it's a question though.
Okay.
Any other reports by staff or appointed officials? Seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session 405.6.d for a collective bargaining status update.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Kirkpatrick, second by Councillor Cody. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good night.